Welcome to episode 773 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and even though Barca is playing every 3 days, you can check out the 5 headlines and the watch-alongs on BigUp for all the, we'll say, in-game action or post-game action. There's still so much other Barca news that's always going on, including we are in the midst of the January transfer window. Things are still happening. Parts are still moving. So to help me break it all down, it is Ruri Barlow of Football España. And I have to ask Rory, as I did in the summertime, I'll ask again here, how's the season going for you?
Yeah, no, it's exciting stuff. I mean, the La Liga have finally started giving me a bit more access to games. Obviously, Xabi Alonso being sacked was quite a big story to kick off the year, so that gave me some work as well. But yeah, it's been an entertaining season. It does feel like there's kind of Villarreal are not that good, but have somehow managed to scrape up so many points more than kind of Betis and the other kind of challengers. And then there's about 6 or 7 teams that are reasonably good, and then there's about 10 teams that are good enough but not great, and then could be dragged into relegation zone. So yeah, it's quite an entertaining year for me, and the title race being close helps as well. I think there's very few kind of perfect teams in La Liga, and very few teams that you can be like, right, okay, I've put my conclusion out on them already, and I know what's happening. So yeah, good, entertaining season, unpredictable, and yeah, lots of open games.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. This coming up this weekend, Barcelona have Real Oviedo, and even Real Oviedo, they are, again, this is the start of the year, and I have to look back to see what the normal number of points are, but they've got 13, so they're still over 10 for the season so far, and Levante have 14. So to your point, I mean, those two are both 4 off even the 18th spot. So those are the two, that being Levante and Real Oviedo, that will likely go down. But yeah, nothing is guaranteed until the very end. And yes, there is that very flawed title race at the top, even though, again, a reminder that if Barcelona win out the rest of their games, which is not going to happen, they would be on 95 points, which is nothing too shabby. Oh, sorry. Let me rephrase that. They don't have to win out the rest of the games. They are on pace for 95 points, and Real Madrid are on pace for 94 points, which isn't that far off what is close to history. Last little note before we get started, just want to say happy birthday to Pau Cubarsi. He's 19 years old, and the reason I do bring that up is because he's been under a lot of fire, under a lot of criticism this season, but he is leading Barcelona's back line. I would say even when he plays with Eric or Gerard Martin, you can tell that Hansi Flick is kind of tasking him to be that focal point, the main leader, the main communicator. And again, I want to remind you that he just turned 19 today. So he is still very much a teenager for one more year. So again, the reminder that for Pau Cubarsi, everybody relax. He's 19, and yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen. So that happy birthday, Pau Cubarsi, or Feliz Cumpleaños is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pau Cubarsi, obviously, it's very hard because I think once these teenage kind of prospects get into the first team, I mean, then they start to be evaluated as adults, essentially. I mean, Lamine Yamal being a perfect example. Lamine Yamal is having a very, very good season, but just by the standards of kind of his last 2 months of last season, the standards of Spain at the Euros, maybe people are slightly disappointed, which I feel is a little bit harsh. I mean, if he peaks in March, April, May, then that will be ideal for Barcelona, and you can look at it as well. I mean, the likes of kind of Gavi kind of bursts onto the scene, everyone loves him. Then there's the kind of, okay, he's not actually the perfect midfielder. There are some flaws to his game, and you get kind of that backlash. So, and I think Cubarsi is going through that a little bit. I think he's not helped by the fact that the team around him is not as strong as it was last year, as kind of sharp as it was last year. So yeah, he's kind of an unfortunate victim. I think he would admit that he's not playing as well as he did last season. But yeah, he's going through that process that all young players kind of tend to do in their kind of second or third years, where players have kind of worked out their weaknesses and strengths, and are starting to kind of target that. And now Cubarsi is tasked with adjusting and improving to that.
Well, even though Pedri is in his 25th season of first team football, I think, for Barcelona, or at least he's played the number of games of that is 25,000, whatever it is, 25,000 minutes. I know that's hyperbole. But Pedri is all of 24 years old. He just turned 24. back in November. And he has been largely healthy for the last year and a half, which has been really good news under Hansi Flick. But he did pick up a muscle injury in the freezing cold temperatures and negatives in the Celsius and under 20 degrees in the Fahrenheit. So with this injury to the hamstring, he will likely miss about a month. So the club has said a month, so we can trust that it will be anywhere between 3.5 and probably 5 weeks, I think, is if the club is coming out and saying a month like that. Now, the good news is, and I talked about this on the 5 headlines yesterday, coming up is Real Oviedo, Copenhagen, Elche, Albacete, Mallorca, Girona. That takes us to February the 15th, and then Levante is the one even after that. So, for the next month of football that Barcelona does play, again, it's Oviedo, Copenhagen, Elche, Albacete, Mallorca, and Girona. I do not really see a team that should, on paper, not be a win. And again, Pedri, yes, Barcelona falls off when Pedri is not there. He controls the match, all those different things. Yes, De Jong is also missing for Copenhagen. So I think we're going to see that midfield of Eric Garcia, of Dani Olmo, and of Fermin Lopez together. We've seen Dani Olmo play as an 8 when necessary, and I think that is what Hansi Flick will go to again. Again, he'll also move, I think, Eric Garcia with Frankie de Jong out, move him to the defensive midfield spot, and then whoever else is available there will play center back, as has been the case so far this season. But how do you think that Barcelona is going to navigate the Pedri injury? And do you think I'm being a little bit too glass half full when it comes to losing Pedri this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's high motivation for Barcelona to get into that top 8 of the Champions League, which they are sitting kind of level on points with kind of 3-4 teams, but just outside of right now, because if they do fall into that playoff, then they will face someone in a Champions League knockout tie, probably without Pedri. And similarly, the Copa del Rey is the one kind of X factor as well, because if they get through to the semis against Albacete, then they'll play the first leg of that against, presumably, possibly an Atleti, Betis, whoever gets through from that tie. So that would be a test as well. I think Elche are the one that kind of I look at. Elche away seems like a relatively tricky fixture. Real Madrid drew there, and Elche have been playing very good football under Sarabia. So that's the one that I would look at as a kind of banana skin. For me, I think if it's interesting because this comes about 4 or 5 days after Hansi Flick and seemingly convinced Marc Bernal to stay and not go out on loan. The club seemed to be open to that. And given that, this is a perfect opportunity to give Bernal minutes. And I think Hansi Flick is almost kind of duty bound to start introducing him more now, because if he doesn't, then Bernal is going to think that he's lost faith in me or that he's not trusted to play in games that, as you pointed out, aren't exactly the kind of top level. So Marc Bernal for me has to see a lot of game time, maybe not against Copenhagen next week, but in those coming games, I think testing him alongside Frankie de Jong will be the answer that they turn to. But the bigger concern is, in my view at least, Pedri being kind of injured again. I mean, this is his 3rd injury of the season. He missed 6 games between the other 2. The fact that he came back and 2-3 weeks later he misses another game, he comes back and he's on the bench initially, and 2-3 weeks later now he's injured again. Playing him obviously -5 degrees in Prague in a difficult situation, having played quite a lot of the last few games, if I remember correctly, kind of started and finished them. Yeah, I think Barcelona last season managed to get away with injuries to a certain extent and not rotate too many of their players. Rafinha and Pedri are really picking up the strain of that this season. And I think Flick needs to be smarter about rotating those 2 players in and out, because as we've seen, Barcelona are just a different side with and without them.
Well, I was surprised at that point to see Rafinha start against Slavia Prague, because he didn't really fully look fit yesterday against the Czechia side. I'll be honest about that. And then with Pedri, the same thing. Like, apparently he was dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. And to your point, this is his 3rd time or 4th time in his career he's gotten injured with a hamstring, but it's also happened in cold weather. So maybe it's just him, the Canary Islands born.
Where it's always 20 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. So it could just even be, again, his upbringing and just his physio makeup and what his body responds to. So yeah, and I totally agree on that point about Bernal. I thought Bernal had a pretty good cameo as well coming on against Slavia Prague. But I was also interested and curious about the club. And we know that they did dangle Marc over the summertime. I haven't really heard those rumors again. Yes, Gabi might be back for March and April, but you have no idea what we can expect from him. And so this idea that like there's too many midfielders or that they would have let Bernal go, again, is a bit puzzling because I think between Bernal and Cancelo, I'm not sure if we truly actually know who Flick even trusts more. I mean, Bernal did come off the bench and Cancelo didn't. And to me, this season, Cancelo has really not impressed or even kept the squad player level that we expected of him this year. Again, Gabi coming back March, April, you have no idea. And you're doing the math and one injury to Pedri and like, well, we need you, Marc Bernal. So why would the club be willing to put him out on loan? He also doesn't help with the wage bill as well if they're looking to bring somebody else in because he doesn't make anything. He's 18 years old, so he's one of the lowest salaries in the entire first team, which is again really puzzling. And to that point about injuries too, I guess we'll transition here a little bit. Eric Garcia, which I said yesterday as well, I thought him and De Jong, and then the 2 goals by Fermin, those are my top 3 men of the match players. I think they were just all a step above even Pedri, but they were a step above their teammates yesterday. And then Eric Garcia, that's the puzzling thing. An injury to Eric Garcia might derail Barcelona's season as much as the injuries that Rafinha and João Garcia did have. And I want to mention too about the Rafinha point, little stat I keep throwing in there until it becomes wrong. The only loss that Rafinha's had this season is when he came back from injury against Chelsea as a sub, and Barcelona has not lost yet this year with Rafinha as a starter. I just throwing that out there. It's just a fact. It's just a point. I just like, what does it mean? I don't know because the team is 11 players, but just that's a point about Rafinha, and then that is definitely going to be something that's tested without Pedri the next month or so. So the only thing about Eric Garcia too is he's the one player for Barcelona this season. And again, if you had told, and I haven't heard from you for a while, so if I had told you, Rory, at the start of the year that Eric Garcia is the only Barcelona player to have appeared in all games played by his team in all competitions this season, he's played all 31 matches so far this year, and he has the most starts for any player for Barcelona, and he leads the team in minutes. If I told you that Eric Garcia had all of that stuff at the start of the year, what would you think I would say went right? Or more importantly, went wrong for Barcelona this year?
Yeah, you would have expected there to be a giant injury crisis at centre back if Eric Garcia was the player with most minutes. But to his credit, it's not as if it's kind of almost been formed. That's just been his level ever since kind of April time last season. I think was when he really started to play at a very high level. Wherever they put him, he's been very good. I still think he makes the most sense as a right back personally. I mean, maybe we'll discuss Jules Koundé's form, but I don't think it's any secret that he's getting a lot of criticism, and it's very hard to fathom why Jules Koundé continues to start in this team, especially when Garcia has been so good. Garcia is, he's playing at a higher level than he's ever played before, and perhaps at that level where I think when Eric Garcia came through and he's an 18, 19, 20-year-old under Guardiola first and then kind of coming into the Barcelona side, this is perhaps the level that people thought he could get to because he's playing so well, he's anticipating so well, he's the leader of this kind of backline, I think, right now, even more so than Cubarsi. For me, I think he's the one that people can rely on, and he's the one that kind of steps out and makes those tackles or those interceptions when, they've been really kind of lacking, I think, in the backline in terms of form. I mean, Balde's been okay, but not great. I mean, Cubarsi, again, criticism we mentioned. I think he's going through a bit of a rough patch of form. And then Koundé has been on a dreadful run for 2-3 months now. So Garcia is the one kind of thing, glue almost kind of holding this team together, because even when he plays in midfield, he's the one that kind of looks like he's stopping those attacks before they get to that final third and start to hurt Barcelona. So hats off to him. I mean, sometimes you've just got to give it up to a player and say you have surpassed all expectations.
Well, it does say a lot that Barcelona made that move for João Cancelo to bring him in. And I agree with you. I think Eric Garcia would most help Barcelona as a right back, but due to everything else happening in the squad, now again with defensive midfield when Hansi Flick needs it, and trying to reincorporate and trust in Bernal's ACL, the injury to Gabi as well, and then looking at what's happened with Ronald Araujo this season. And I said this too yesterday, and I'll reinforce it, that for the second half of the season, Ronald Araujo, and credit to friend of the show, Kevin Williams, has been saying this for months now, Ronald Araujo, and I add Marc Bernal to that, those two players solve a lot of Flick's issues, almost more than anybody else in the squad. If those two were to get to their top form, now Bernal, obviously, as a youngster, we don't know what his top form is, but even if he gets to what we know him to be capable of as an 18-year-old, that version of him, and then Ronald Araujo returns to, I mean, Barcelona, I think, would take 90% of him at his very best, or 85% of him at his very best. And if those two somehow found this thing, right, they solve so many of the squad issues, and it allows you to do so many more things. I'm going to ask you now, how do you feel about João Cancelo's move to Barcelona? But I think I kind of know the answer, because it's not it's not like it's some kind of complex thing that, now I didn't see Barcelona raising the Champions League trophy before, but now that João Cancelo is back, now I can see their hands on the trophy. I know that you're probably going to agree with that sentiment.
It certainly didn't help that he came against Real Sociedad. And to be fair, he does play a role in the goal. Like he beats his man, puts a cross, and ends up coming back across to Rashford. But he misplaced 2 or 3 passes that were just like mind-bogglingly bad. And yeah, I don't know. Cancelo.
But in his defense, he had not played football in 4 or 5 months. So as much as we expect his form, my worry is almost the opposite side of that, yes, he was involved in the goal, and anything attacking that he does at all will have Koulé saying, wait a second, Balde and Koundé don't offer that at all. And this bum is offering that. The guy who can't defend is offering this. That's my fear. It's that he is literally just going to arrive and hurt the stock of Balde and Koundé in the eyes of Koulés, because of, he's a talented attacking player. But to that point, yes, I mean, did not cover himself in glory with a bunch of those passes. Totally agree. I'm not defending Cancelo as much as I am just reminding you that he hadn't played in 4 or 5 months. So I did expect him to be a little bit rusty in the decisions. But yes, if he does that in 3 months' time, Hansi Flick probably just won't play him.
In Cancelo's defense, but also in the club's kind of whatever the opposite of their defense is, because that's the problem, is you bring him in having not played in 3-4 months as well. He's going to be rusty. It's going to take him at least a month, 2 months to get back to kind of match fitness. So what are you really expecting from his impact? I get that he does have the versatility, and I do think that he can add things in terms of going forward that Koundé and Balde don't necessarily have. He gives you an extra rotational option, so that there is positives. And I just about subscribe to the argument that it's better to have Cancelo than it is to have no one. But having said that, I've failed to accept the argument that there was nobody else on the market, that they couldn't have waited a couple more weeks and seen what was out there. Because, I mean, I declare myself not a particular fan of Cancelo. I think that Barcelona's season under Xavi Hernandez, it was being held together by straws and clutches, but it was very much torpedoed by Cancelo in a certain sense in those games against PSG and Real Madrid. I just don't think he's a viable option as a defender if you're playing a big game. And you can say, well, he helps us to break down those defenses that are set deeper in those games in La Liga. And that's a valid point. But Barcelona's problem isn't usually scoring goals. Barcelona have goals. They've got Rashford now in, and he adds kind of an extra thing against those kind of deeper defenses. They've got Fermín López, Dani Olmo. They've got all of these weapons to break down defenses. What they don't have is defenders that are reliable at the moment. And so to bring in Cancelo seems like you're kind of buying further into the Hansi Flick kind of model of, well, we'll score more goals than you, we'll give up some chances. But it was a fine line, and a fine offside line last season, and to kind of risk unbalancing things a little bit more in favour of that Hansi Flick model seems nonsensical to me. But if they win the treble, if they win the Champions League, then I'll apologise to Deco for that.
Well, yes, Cancelo, going back to his first run at Barcelona, and considering even his time back in the day at Benfica, he's never been known for someone who's going to position his body well against crosses. That is one of the big things. And the way that Barcelona defend the set pieces against Slavia Prague on those corners, like it just makes you worry when you don't really have some kind of physical presence to deal with the box stuff. Like some of the box defending from Barcelona, like it's one thing in the transitions, because there is so many transition opportunities when teams are just absorbing pressure and coming at you. So that's like one thing. Like I do say, like, for the number of times that Gerard Martin or Eric or Cubarsi, you think they're getting exposed in transition. I mean, no, that's by design. And I think most defenders would be exposed in that kind of space in the modern game. That happens. But my concern for Barcelona more is the stuff that like Slavia Prague and in the box, and just the chaos that seems to happen once the opposition gets into that final third and that final phase of play. There's just been so many times where João Garcia, who I don't think actually covered himself in glory in both the Real Sociedad or against Slavia Prague. I think those are his two worst performances of the season for Barcelona. And so again, he's not bailing you out. It's not just about the transition opportunities. It's again in the box defending when you're in that final phase where you kind of got to where you need to be into the chaos of a transition, defending transition, but you haven't gotten rid of the danger just yet. And I think, to Frankie de Jong's credit, the one area where I think Frankie de Jong also struggles is literally in that moment where even Frankie de Jong, I think, is pretty good in transition, but then that it's the moment after when it's time to kind of set up, find your man quickly, and get into that chaos when you're defending your final third. I think that's kind of his also one like glaring weak spot on the field usually, where there's so many times where like, why didn't he follow that guy where he should have? And that's kind of been a theme throughout his career. Now, you mentioned quickly that you thought that Barcelona could have found an experienced center back to reinforce the squad if they had waited. We're going to talk about Dro Fernandez, ter Stegen. We're going to get into the individual moves, but I will just quickly introduce the fact that, yes, that €6 million release clause for Dro helps, but again, that only helps the wage bill that La Liga would then, a new wage bill number that La Liga would set after January, which doesn't really help Barcelona because, again, Dro, his wages were so small because he didn't accept that renewal at 18. That would have then changed for the next few months his wages and increased those. And then ter Stegen, we'll get to this here. Girona are not really paying a lot of that stuff. And so ter Stegen's wages aren't really coming off the books and not really helping either. So for Barcelona to still be 14 million away from the 1-to-1, I kind of push back a little bit with the numbers there. I don't see who and I don't see how, looking at the market, Barcelona are going to possibly be able to get an experienced center back that is going to feel like you're upgrading the squad. Like we mentioned it. Cancelo, did he upgrade the squad? No, he reinforced depth. And I think for Barcelona's back line, it's like, could you have gone out there and found an experienced center back? Yes, probably if you went digging. But I mean, what are you going to get? Who are you going to get who's 31, 32? I mean, there's, unless you call up Inigo Martinez at Al Nassr, and again, but his wages at Al Nassr, it's like Barcelona cannot even accept half of that into their wage bill, which is what Liga would then require. So he would, at minimum, I think, be 4.5 mil, which with Barcelona can't get under. So it's like it's a numbers game that I think does hamper you quite a bit, which is surprising too. Is this is kind of a two-part question, if you want to call it that. For the summer, there was this very loose report by a Catalan journalist. Barcelona is 14 million away from 1-to-1. Which, again, for other clubs, they panic, but I just want to let you know that in Barcelona terms, as someone who covers them week in and week out, being just 14 million away from being able to spend a 1-to-1, I mean, that might as well just be pennies or hay pennies or whatever your smallest currency is over there in the UK or in Spain, the tiniest fraction of a peso. But the apparently the names that are linked, and I think this is just again to sell papers. We know that Julian Alvarez, Gavardiol from Man City, Bastoni from Inter Milan, and Slotterbeck right now at Dortmund, and then Marcus Rashford. So apparently it's Alvarez, Rashford, and then one of Gavardiol, Bastoni, and Slotterbeck. I don't know.
Just give me an estimate how much you think those three players would cost, Dan.
How much I think they would cost in total? 210 to 220 mil. Because I'm doing the math on Alvarez, and I'm like, that's 90 if you negotiate with Atletico Madrid. And then Bastoni, I mean, Slotterbeck, you get because Dortmund obviously are losing him. So that's a little bit different. But yeah, Gavardiol or Bastoni, why would Inter or City? That's not anywhere less than 70. And then Rashford, I think Rashford, this has been my hot take about Rashford. I think the club is posturing. They're like, we don't know what's going to happen. No, they do. Do you know that Man United absolutely does not want to pay his 14 million euro wages, and he's going to go right back to them and want those numbers? So I think it will behoove Man United to, be brave, posture. Hey, we said 30 million. 30 million means 30 million. I think that when push comes to shove, they're going to go, yeah, actually, we don't want to pay Rashford's wages, so we'll cut you a deal. He'll re-sign a new deal, or he'll do a renewal with Barcelona to lower those wages quite a bit to like 9 to 10 million. And Barcelona will then only pay I'd say about 20 to Man United again. So that's actually Rashford, believe it or not, is like the one spot where I'm optimistic. The rest of them, yeah, I mean, unless Barcelona finds 200 million along with that 14 million to get back to the 1-to-1, which seems to be the biggest problem. So yeah, I don't know where and then the other problem.
Those Lewandowski wages are looking large.
Well, here's right. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because going to get Lewandowski on 13 million wages if he were to return. Again, it's basically the minimum would have to be 13 mil, which is half of his current wages with bonuses, which I believe, yes, half of the maximum that the league allows the salary to be reduced. So if his 26 plus or 26.8, I think at this point, million euro salary, if that's half, that's 13. Now, if they're only counting the base salary, which maybe you can help me with that rule, then it'll come down to like 10.5 base pay. But still, like, you've still got Lewandowski on 10.5. Which I think is kind of fair based on his production, but that's also next year's production, not even another year of aging for Lewandowski. All right, I'm depressed. You did it. Thanks, Ruri.
Sorry for bringing that background. Apparently, you're out of intensive care, though, according to Laporta. So there's that to be happy with.
Yeah. So I guess, like, I didn't ask you a question there, but between everything we just talked about, I mean, how realistic do you think it was for Barcelona to get some kind of additional player here in the winter? And then how optimistic from what you hear, again, because you're in the world too, where you're still hearing about, I haven't really mentioned Negrera or the latest version of Negrera because I'm always just waiting until the courts are done with everything. But the 8.5 mil in apparent referee payments that were made, like, those are still out there in the ether and all that stuff. So yeah, where are you sitting as far to what you're hearing about Barcelona's financial situation, both here in the winter time, with if they were going to possibly get anybody else, or then jumping ahead to the summer, and how realistic some of that crazy talk is?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I kind of remain as kind of hands off and kind of stood back from it as you do with the Negrera stuff, because every season for 3 seasons now we've heard that Barcelona are getting out of the kind of being over the salary limit and back into the so-called 1-to-1 rule. Every season we hear that things are going well. Then there is a lever that needs to be paid, or there is something that hasn't happened. La Liga will need to accept something. So yeah, every year we get this kind of talk in kind of January, February time about what they're going to do. And I think if you're Deco, it makes sense that you be pursuing these players on the off chance that you do actually have the money to sign them. But yeah, it's very hard to believe what they'll be able to bring in. I'll say that they have brought in João Garcia and Marcus Rashford, even when they seem to have very little to kind of no room to work with. Dani Olmo the season before that, even although that was kind of a bit of a risky one based on how they ended up registering him. And before that, it was kind of Ilkay Gundogan. So we had like kind of 1 or 2 kind of free transfers come in. So yeah, I think you can expect Barcelona to be able to bring in maybe a Marcus Rashford, but maybe not much more than that. And I think it is a bit of a problem, because Rashford for me makes sense as a deal in terms of what quality are we getting, what price are we getting it at. And I think you're right in terms of, yeah, you can negotiate Manchester United down, particularly if you can play the Cancelo card and say, well, Rashford only wants to join us, he's not going anywhere else, so you may as well just accept this. And I think the alternative Barcelona can kind of propose, or at least they've said they would, was that, okay, Rashford can come back on loan then if you don't want to cut us a deal. So yeah, I think there's reason to believe that would be kind of a smart deal, or a deal that they can do well. But at the same time, it's just like, at what opportunity cost are they doing it? Because look at this defense. I mean, Andreas Christensen, free transfer, decent, but you never know when he's going to be fit. Ronald Araujo is a bit of a kind of up in the air. We don't know how he's going to perform. I agree with you when you say that he would solve a lot of problems. And I think if I was Hansi Flick, I'd be tempted to use the next month to just try and recover Araujo, getting back to where he was, at the very least, and give it a shot, because otherwise you're going to be playing with a flawed defense if you don't have him. So yeah, you've got Araujo, who's a bit of an uncertainty. Cubarsi came through the youth system, and Eric Garcia, obviously, who arrived on a free as well. So you haven't invested in your centre-back room for 5, 6, 7 years. I mean, obviously Inigo Martinez came in, but again on a free. Jules Koundé arrived, 50 million. He was supposed to be a centre-back, but equally if you take him out of kind of the right-back zone and you look at it, well, Barcelona haven't invested in a right back or a left back for years and years and years either. So if you look at kind of the other areas of the team, and granted they do have a midfield that consists mostly of academy products that have done very well, their attack is full of kind of expensive stars in Lewandowski and Rafinha and Rashford and Ferran. That's the area they need to invest in. That's the last area they haven't invested in since the pandemic, really. So yeah, if it was me, I would be attempted to kind of prioritize that above all else, knowing that even if I rate Cubarsi, and I think he's good, he's probably your centre-back for the next 10 years, even if I rate Eric Garcia and he's playing very well, I just don't buy them as a kind of a pairing. Balde, I think, is good, but can be improved. Koundé, you hope he comes out of this, but there are four positions there, or at least three, that you could potentially be like, this could do with strengthening. And I look upfield, I look at the others, and it's like, okay, yes, I maybe need a striker. Well, I probably do need a number 9, but can I get that number 9 in? Can I get Julian Alvarez in? Probably not. Can I get Haaland? Probably not. So at that point, you're going down a level, and you're buying either potential or somebody that hasn't kind of proven it for 50, 60, 70 million. So yeah, for me, I go out and buy a certain centre-back if that's the one kind of bit of budget I have money for, rather than kind of hedge my bets up front. That would be my view on it, at least.
Yeah, I think I'm not say I'm pretty sold on that, but I think when we see the way that football was played in the transitional nature and the speed and the athleticism, especially in the Champions League, like these teams, I watched Arsenal beat up Inter Milan the other day, and you look at their roster and you go, yeah, I mean, they don't really have that's the thing about Koundé. It's like competition is good, and so having the ability to be like, it's not that Koundé's losing his place, like, and that's how it feels at Barcelona. That the depth of the squad for now 6 years, as you mentioned, is such that it's like, oh, this guy's on the outs, but he's not. Like again, that same thing about Costello and Bernal. It's like I understand that Bernal will want more time, but there has to be. Not everyone can be the starter. Not everyone can be the starter all the time. And I think having as many players as possible be as close to each other where you could plug and play in different ways is really, really useful. And Barcelona just have not had the financial might to do that. And I think I said last summer that last summer was the first time where I felt, and now this year I add to that. I'll say even this year feels for good reason, like the most talented and deepest squad that Barcelona's had in 6 years. And that's true. And you'd hope that by continuing to come out of the financial issues post the pandemic, post Bartomeu, which is a name that we're still saying 6 years on, that Barcelona are continuing to build and refortify a squad to make it deeper. Because at this point, that's what they need. They need a deeper squad that can do different things and solve different problems. Now, one of the things that might hurt that is a name that I have a lot to say on this. And I've over the years gotten criticism, and I'll probably get it in the comments here for answers I give. Hey, Dan, why don't you let your guest talk? So I'm absolutely going to let you talk on this first before I rant and rave. And so the name I'm going to mention here, it's not ter Stegen. That's a different ranting and raving. It is Dro Fernandez, because I think as you are online as I am, whenever an academy player leaves, there's that knee-jerk reaction. And I said it on my watch-along stream. You never know, and I always wonder, like, the avatars are so frustrating on social media, and obviously on Twitter. To put it kindly, it has not gotten better. If anything, it has got a million times worse, because now who you're arguing with might just be not a human person, and that's just made it ever so worse. But a lot of times, the strongest visceral reactions to an academy prospect leaving, a teenager, is potentially another person who is in their teenage years or in their early 20s, or someone that has never paid a bill or doesn't understand the business of football and just feels like, it's all about vibes, it's all about feelings, it's all about my club and passion, whatever. And they expect that the people and the players are going to love the club more than the club loves them. And again, I think it's so interesting, almost the dichotomy of how fans are treating Dro's exodus as opposed to ter Stegen's exodus, right? It's like, Dro is a player, we don't want you to leave, please stay and become a star here because of potential. Ter Stegen, get out of my club. You expletive here, expletive there, right? It's just like, so one of the players who's given the best years of his life, 11 years, 12 years of his life to Barcelona, living in the city, has family there, and you're like, get out of here, kick it to the curb. And then Dro Fernandez, it's like, this kid who just moved to Barcelona in 2022, the summer, with Pedro Villar, who I just covered from Valmiñor in Galicia, where he's from. So he's been there for 4 years. And again, it's like, why isn't he willing to bleed and die for the crest? And it's just, your first captain, you're kicking in the curve. And I've kind of already said a little bit about where my answer is going to go, but what do you think about Dro Fernandez leaving Barcelona?
Yeah, I think it's more, well, just to kind of back up what you're saying there, the reaction, the kind of knee-jerk reaction, probably not helped, or probably encouraged a little bit by the fact that Hansi Flick was so peed off by it, and that makes sense, I guess. If you're Hansi Flick and he's the one that you bet on, then yes, you would feel a bit kind of turned away or hurt by it, especially when he seems to have built quite a good relationship with a lot of these younger prospects. But I think it's more of the club's issue than it is Dro's. I mean, they have this kind of policy of keeping the wages low and keeping the kind of release clauses at 6 million for everyone, and I think that makes sense. But you've got to protect yourself more. I mean, otherwise clubs will just come in and poach players. I mean, Marc, what does he get in the Premier League on the open market just for being young and having been signed from Chelsea? Now, they probably sell him for 10, 15 million to Burnley, just out pure potential. I mean, Dro Fernandez as well. I think another one, Elijah Mariba, he left for kind of 16 to 18 million. And that was a deal that made sense. I think that was a fair deal at that time, and that you could swing that both ways. If he comes potential, then yeah, okay, Leipzig have done the work. They've turned him into that player to a certain extent, and they've bet on the potential. With Barcelona here, you lose Dro, you don't really get much in terms of the financial outlay or the talents. You don't really get much compensation for it, which is where I think Barcelona are going wrong and where I think they need to be smarter. Sport said, and Sport are up and down with their reporting, but Sport said that Dro didn't have a renewal offer on the table, which, I mean, if that's the case, that is complete just lackadaisical management, to be perfectly honest, because, I mean, anyone who's turning 18, if you're a Barcelona academy graduate, you should have a deal kind of, if not on the table for 6 months, certainly kind of you should have something almost in place if they want to keep you. So yeah, I think if I'm Barcelona, I'm looking at this kind of internally as a management problem, because why is Luis Enrique able to kind of come in and convince him that he can do well at PSG, and us not convince him to sign a new deal before it got to this stage, to be perfectly honest? It's more, for me, I think the issue is more Barcelona, the way that they're losing him as opposed to him being lost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you brought up a lot of interesting points that I agree with. I think a lot of fans are backing up Hansi Flick because you're right. If there's one guy who has egg on his face here, of course, with the renewal stuff, I'll talk about the money in a second. But for Hansi Flick, you're right. Like, he's the one guy. Like, when I've been covering the academy for so many years, and like Dro is in that next level. Like, he has his close control. We've seen it. It's unbelievable. Like, it really is. Like, he makes good, quick decisions in the final third. He, as a future number 10, it's a lot of fun potential that he absolutely does have. And we've already seen it in 5 appearances of the first team in 330 minutes. But Hansi Flick, he picked him from, looking at even the academy managers, like, he wasn't already fast-tracked to Barça Athletic or the U19s. Like, Hansi Flick came in, saw that kid playing for the U18s, the Juvenil Bay, and he jumped him straight to the first team. He bypassed him from the U19s and Barça Athletic, which happens with other players, again, like Lamine Yamal and Pau Cubarsi, whatever. And even Bernal and Gabi, like, I'm naming a bunch of players, but those are all kind of, I know it sounds stupid, but special cases. Like, the similar talents to Dro Fernandez were Tony Fernandez, Guille Fernandez, Kim Junyet, Dani Rodriguez, João Hernandez. Like, those are the names right there that Dro Fernandez jumped over, who were with the U19s or Barça Athletic. And Hansi Flick, again, took players that, not all of those are the same player. Of course, they're all different. Like, Dani Rodriguez is a winger. Tony Fernandez is a winger / false nine, so whatever it is. But, like, they're slightly different players. Yes, they do different things. But of that collection, Hansi Flick could have decided to go all in on any of those names, and he picked Dro Fernandez, again, who's the one who was even a level down from them. So Hansi Flick is the one who believed in him the most. And now for him to say, I'm getting a lack of opportunities, like, that is the one area with, again, the player's entourage, whether it's the agent. Again, I always, at 18, I have to choose in the U.S. You have to choose where we go to college in the U.S. and where we want to, and what job we want in the future. And we get this insane amount of student loans here in the United States. I'm just explaining to you the fun parts of this, Ruri. In the U.S., you get to sign up at 18 or 17, depending on your age, for an insurmountable amount of student loan debt, depending on the school.
Seems like a flawed system, Dan.
No, it's perfect, actually. And the best part is that universities and colleges are continuing to charge more and more. I think it's my favorite part of it. But anyway, this is not a referendum on the academic, the very capitalistic enterprise system that is the college and university system in the U.S.
To go on a tangent.
Yeah. But my point there is that at 17 and 18 in the U.S., we have that, and you make your choices, and people are saying, hey, you chose to do that for the remainder of your life. So I get it. It's a little cutthroat in the U.S., and it's cutthroat in Spain too, that these players are making choices again at 18 that are very much, again, going to define not only their lives, but the lives of their whole families, right? Like, again, what I said before too, if Deco and the club offered him renewal and he chose not to sign it, then it does make him believe that it came down to money. But if there was no renewal on the table, then yes, that's absolutely completely malpractice, without a question. But I also have seen too that numerically, because of being in Spain, and we've seen this before with these release clauses, that the clubs do have limitations until players in Spain at 18 get to sign their first long-term professional contract. So they are hampered a little bit there by these set release clauses, which is set for all players in La Masia at 6 million euros. That is the release clause. And with Marc, same thing. Chelsea came in 2024, said, hey, we're going to help you pay for it, because the players do actually have to pay their own release clauses. PSG did the same thing with Neymar. They basically gave him this large sum of money to pay his own release clause, and that's what he did. The only special cases that come for Barcelona are when it's a verbal agreement, again, of a player that Barcelona are like, at 15 years old, that kid, and there's usually a verbal agreement. And I kind of want to make this a little quiz here. There's been 4 players for Barcelona in the last 5 years that happened with. Can you name the before they turned 18 verbal agreement that happened for players? There's 4. It was 4.
Right. Okay. Lamine Yamal.
Correct.
Marc Bernal.
No, not Bernal.
Would it have been presumably Cubarsi at
Correct.
17?
Yep.
Gavi debuted. No.
Nope. The other 2 are not with Barcelona at the moment. Well, one is definitely, and we already mentioned the one of them.
Mark Yu.
No.
Surely not.
Nope. Not Marc Yu. Nope.
Now you're testing me.
Well, we already mentioned him. You mentioned him actually in your answer before we talked about this as another player that came up at 18 and then left for big money to RB Leipzig.
Being really thick here, but go on. Put me in misery.
To RB Leipzig. So Elias Moriba. Yeah. And that happened after he scored the hat-trick against Real Madrid. And the other one is the one that makes me sad. That's Ansu Fati. So he did that at 16. So those are the 4 players that signed those special case verbal agreements before the 18, where it was like you can always back out, but those players were not going to back out based on the financial promises they were given. And then basically everybody else, 18, then we figure it out. And that's just how it goes in the academy. That's how it goes with the release clauses, because you never know at that age. Like you can't promise a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old 10 million euros of the world. It's just not going to work like that. So yeah, I mean, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, get your bag. As a kid, like, or whatever it is, like I know the agent, Ivan de la Peña, who's a former Barcelona player, friend of Luis Enrique, which also helped with the deal. And he's also the agent for Gavi and Eric Garcia. So I get it. You know, the money is on the table. There it is. So I said it before, and I'll say it again too about Dro. Yeah, it's a loss. It's a loss because Hansi Flick trusted him the way he did. Because I do still think that Tony Fernandez and Guille Fernandez are bigger talents, but I do think that because Dro was trusted by Hansi Flick, he was going to get more opportunities, and that just means he's more valuable. If the manager values you, then that just makes you more valuable than the other players I think have a bigger potential. People are already saying that the he'll turn 16 in March, but Ibrahima Tunkara, that he is also a much bigger talent. But again, he only turned 16 in March. But also, Lamine Yamal was debuting at 15, right? So it's like if you're a big enough talent for Barcelona, once you're 16, 17, you're already going to be pushing into the first team. Very much like he was. Again, he pushed into 17. So, yes, to your point, I think other than Hansi Flick being disappointed, we move. And it's 6 million euros, and he's not going to affect the wage bill, which does transition to the next thing. Ter Stegen, speaking of not helping the wage bill, the initial reports that Mundo Deportivo reported with that Barcelona were going to pay 90% of its wages while he was at Girona. And that is that's actually about right or low. Girona, who was part of the City Football Group, speaking of big money, they still said, hey, we don't actually want to pay much of his salary. They also can't afford much of his salary. Remember, just being part of Man City does not mean that, or City Football Group does not mean that your wage bill, the Girona wage bill is set by the Liga. So Girona, their budget is different than Man City's, and so they can only handle on their wages a certain number. So they apparently will only pay 500,000 euros, which again, I would love 500,000 euros, but that does not help Barcelona because apparently Marc-Andre ter Stegen's salary will still be covered, the rest of it, by Barcelona. He makes 19.8 mil a season. So my math isn't great, but even for half a year, 500,000 feels low, doesn't really help Barcelona. And really, it actually does seem more like a favor to a player whose contract runs out in 2020. He has significant wages that includes salary deferrals from previous seasons. So it's not like Barcelona are paying ter Stegen that number because they want to. It's that they had to because of the salary deferral. The same thing with De Jong. You can criticize those guys all you want, that they're not worth their contracts and their level has dropped, but they are paid the money they're paid because they did a good service to the club. And I just want to remind people of that one more time. So I totally understand that even for ter Stegen, he wants to play at this summer's World Cup for Germany, needs to be playing regular game action. I don't actually know if he's even going to beat out Paulo Gazzaniga for the starting spot at Girona. I'll let you talk about that. But yeah, he also was willing to accept that the parent club clause where he will not be playing against Barcelona on February the 15th. So this was kind of what the deal had to be, I guess. And I guess best case scenario for ter Stegen is he does get the gloves, he does go to the World Cup for Germany, and then Barcelona have a little bit of, they're able to negotiate because clubs actually do want this kind of player.
Yeah, and I mean, he will beat out Gazzaniga. I've watched a lot of Gazzaniga this season, and he's had a few absolute howlers. But I think for ter Stegen as well, I mean, I think there is an intelligence to it. I mean, I've seen some people in the Catalan media kind of Mundo Deportivo, someone it was, maybe Roger Torello. Sorry if it wasn't him, Roger. But they were kind of saying, well, I mean, if ter Stegen's not going to ease the wage bill much, why are Barcelona letting him go when you could have him as a good backup for João Garcia? And as we've seen, João Garcia spent 2 months out injured this season, as opposed to Szczesny, who has looked more retired than he did last season in his brief spell in the first team. But yeah, and I get it. But also I think that you gamble slightly on the fact that if ter Stegen performs well at Girona, if he gets that kind of feeling of being kind of a regular, being an important part of a team again, if other clubs see him performing well, then there is a chance that ter Stegen says, look, I'm going to call it quits. I want to go play and I want to kind of feel like a footballer again, because if he's going to sit behind João Garcia for the next 2 years of his contract, yes, he might earn a lot of money, but you never know. I think the one kind of tie he has to Barcelona more than anything is his family, and I think that seems to be the reason that he's accepted to go to Girona as opposed to kind of another loan move. And that's something that the club can't really do anything about. But I think you gamble on it, and you gamble on ter Stegen perhaps kind of just feeling a bit more like a footballer. And even if he ends up kind of going back to Girona on loan next season and Girona can pay maybe 2-3 million, then that's 2-3 million better off than you were with ter Stegen on the books as a backup goalkeeper. So yeah, I think it's a move that makes sense for everyone, to be perfectly honest. Even if he would be a better backup goalkeeper, it's not an unhappy ter Stegen, or ter Stegen who has missed out on the World Cup is going to be of less value to you than ter Stegen could be in the summer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, yeah, even on his wages next year, getting a club to pay even 16 million for him, boy, that's a lot. And yeah, 16 mil for a backup goalkeeper in your squad. Again, yeah, you feel like someday Barcelona's going to get out of the mess of the pandemic and the deferred wages and ever, but it just continues.
And even on that, I mean, he has deferred wages, but it was Laporta that gave him the new 5-year deal. So
true.
Yeah, he's locked in, and it's Laporta's heritage.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so some minor moves, and I know that I've talked a lot in this show, but you're going to have to hear from me a little bit more here because we are going down a little bit the levels here. One of the better left-footed prospects at center back that Barcelona has, and there's not many of them, but Andres Cuenca, who defensively has just never really been it. Defensive side of the ball is why we don't see him. He did debut with the first team last season or 2 seasons ago or something like that. But either way, his contract expires on the 30th of June. It seems like his camp was hesitant to sign, and Barcelona have not really offered him renewal that he seemed to want. So he will potentially, this is in the final stage, we don't know yet, but it seems like Como have come in, who, Sergio Roberto, Cesc Fabregas, all that. We've seen different players go there. And the idea, if he does go to Como right now, would be to immediately loan the player. If not, they'll probably get him on a free in the summer. Barcelona will not receive a transfer fee for his departure, but they could retain a percentage of any future sale, which, again, could be good. I think if he does continue to, I think he's only 18 still, or 19. So if he flushes himself out physically and he does become a better defender, which can happen, again, with young players. Defender, center back is a hard thing, but his ball playing ability and being left-footed, he has the potential of being valuable if he does put things together. So that's the Andres Cuenca stuff. And then Kim Junet, another, again, talent, which I think not A tier for Barcelona's academy, but B tier, like guys that I had like, hey, I think these kids could definitely play in the first team if opportunity presents it, or the manager picks them. And Kim Jeanette was another one with Andres Cuenca. Ameria are apparently interested, so it seems like Kim Jeanette, he does seem that he is the last season and a half between a few little injuries and things like that. He's going to not be renewing his contract with Barcelona, and Barcelona don't want to lose him for free like they have with other players. So it does seem like because Flick prioritizes physicality with his players, and King Jeanette is not a physical player. He's a really good 1v1 dribbler, one of the best in the academy. He very much is like Dro in that way. But, it seems like it's also counterintuitive, though, because Dro was in the first team and he was lacking the physicality that even other academy prospects have. So it does seem counterintuitive. But yeah, Kim Jeanette just has never really had that shot. And so it seems like he'll be going to Ameria in either I guess if Ameria gets promoted, in the first division, potentially, but likely in the second division at this point, because again, getting out of the second division is really hard. Dani Rodriguez, the left winger, has been healthy after being out. Again, it's just a lot of injuries for him too. He's going to go on loan to Dinamo Zagreb for the rest of the season, which I think also has something to do with I know this isn't finished, but what is the youngster's name? Oh, Cardoso Varela, the 16-year-old winger. So that might help with those negotiations, all that different stuff. Although Sergi Dominguez just left over the summertime for Dinamo Zagreb again. So, and Dani Olmo, again, are we seeing all the different the overlaps and things like that? And then much smaller minor moves, termination of the contract of Marcos Perriego, who came over from Rayo Vallecano, is a decent Spanish prospect. I'm a bit surprised with this contract termination. I think there's something, again, I think he just turned 19. So there might be something family, or he wants to go back home, something like that, that I think is kind of brewing under the surface there. Because again, he was not an A-list tier Spanish talent, but he was playing with the youth teams. Like, he was a pretty big get from Rayo Vallecano at the time. But so his contract is terminated. And then having recovered from his ACL this season, Adrian Gil, who spent 6+ years in Barca's youth academy, now 20, he will be likely returning to the U.S. here for Atlanta United under Tata Martino, who was, again, former Barcelona manager, who they didn't overlap, so don't worry about that. But again, they share that some of the same ideas, and they have the same background in that way. So he will likely be coming to Atlanta United to try to reset his career, figure some things out back here in the U.S. So those are the minor moves through the academy. I don't really know. If you have anything to contribute, Rory, to that, please do. But it does feel like Barcelona are losing some of the investments in La Masia. So I guess what you can speak to is the fact that, we saw this. It's cyclical. La Masia can be cyclical. That there's just too many kids from La Masia have now in the first team, and there's not you can't have an entire squad of 18 to 20-year-old academy kids. It just doesn't work that way. So I think we're now seeing in this transfer window the repercussions of having so many young talents be with the first team.
Yeah, I agree. I'd probably just more double down on my kind of Dro point. I think, to be fair to Real Madrid, not to compare La Fabrica with La Masia, as Alvaro Arbeloa has been really trying hard to do in the last kind of week or so. But Real Madrid have been very good at kind of selling their academy products for kind of 2-3 million, 50% sell on clause, and say, look, I mean, if he works out, he works out, and some of those have been successful, some of them have not, but you risk kind of missing out on kind of 5-10 million here or there, which can be very helpful in these cases. And even I think if you look back to kind of the likes of Conrad de la Fuente, I mean, they got kind of 2-3 million for him after kind of 5-6 appearances in the first team. So yeah, I just think Barcelona can be doing more to sell these kids. They have literally the most successful academy in the world, maybe with Ajax or one or two others. Just being there should almost carry a value of kind of 1-2 million. If you're selling to kind of Premier League clubs, if you're selling to top division Serie A clubs. So yeah, I think Barcelona can be doing more to get something financially out of these players. And if you look at kind of the Premier League clubs now, I mean, half of their business is buying in these academy kids at 15, 16 and selling them off at 19 for 15, 20 million to clubs once they're developed a little bit. So yeah, I think Barcelona just financially not really a club that can afford to kind of hemorrhage talent without getting anything in return. So I don't know, maybe it's just the market. Maybe these players aren't wanted. Maybe these offers aren't there for them. But I struggle to believe that they're there for so many other clubs and not for Barcelona.
Well, you did mention Real Madrid. I will say I respect Xabi Alonso, and I have never liked Arbeloa. So I think for me, I'm kind of excited about this because he just I like that I get to dislike Real Madrid's manager. I think there's always something to that. I really, it helps me with my content. Having a guy that I never really liked. Like he wasn't in that top tier of hate like Pepe or really just Pepe, but Ramos, of course. But yeah, he was like in that next tier down. But yeah, not a fan. Never really liked him. But I think it is interesting that Real Madrid have a manager that is so much about Los Blancos. That isn't just about like, coming in and we're the first team and with the stars. Like I think it is actually interesting that they have this manager that's like, hey, I've been to Real Madrid. Like we have this system. We have, they can complement the stars, whatever. And the last time that happened was, goodness, like the late 80s, right? When they were forced financially to call up that group of your Spanish. You might remember
the Quinta del Butre was the big one.
Yep, there you go.
In the late 80s, as you say. They did try it in early 2000s. Zidanes y Pavones was the whole thing. Francisco Pavón, defender. Yep. They tried to bring through it. And Raúl Bravo was another one. This was obviously off the back of Raúl González. But yeah, Real Madrid did have this version of what in theory Barcelona are, which is stars and academy talent.
But then
Florentino Perez lost patience.
Well, he lost patience, but also like the jersey, like the explosion in the early 2000s of like merchandising and jerseys and then broadcast rights in like 03-ish, 04, like those deals like really went out of like, started to really explode. So yeah, then you have Los Galacticos and you're never gonna get back from that. All right, last two notes and then Rory has to go. João Hernandez, the report is now with Dro gone. He has actually been selected over Tony Fernandez and Guille Fernandez as like the kid that's going to be on the bench now a lot. He can play as either an attacking midfielder or a left winger. And I think that profile is the one that Hansi Flick wants, a kid that can play on the left or the attacking midfielder, which is not the profile that Tony or Guille is or any other player in the academy right now. So he's also going to be renewing. And at 18 years old, again, making the bench for Hansi Flick now for the third time this season against Slavia Prague. I will say about João Hernandez, and I mentioned this on the La Masia recaps, he's never really been, anytime I ever do a recap, kind of in that top five, but I can get it wrong. Like there's something that Hansi Flick might be seeing in that academy kid that I don't see. He's also just 18 years old, and he's been a regular starter for Giuliano Belletti game in and game out in the fourth division. So he could also be improving, and there's just different things that we don't see. So there's that one note. And then after beating, this is about the Femeni real quick. I, again, don't really cover them too often until the second half of the season when they're winning trophies, because if I'm not covering them, that just means they're usually winning. I really only mention if they like falter. But after beating Athletic Club 3-1 yesterday in the Spanish Super Cup final, in the semifinal, they'll play against Real Madrid in the final on Saturday. And we're going to get a bit of that 2011 El Clasico feel, because while they have Sevilla the following Sunday in the league, then it's Real Madrid again in the Copa del Reina quarterfinals the next Thursday. So it's a lot of Barcelona, Real Madrid coming up in the coming weeks, and that's a team that they did beat 4-0 back in November, but Real Madrid are also much improved, and they are pushing the Femeni a little bit. So like it's a reminder that now in Spain, if Barcelona do not want to invest in the Femeni the way they have in the previous seasons, where they've created that gap in Spain. If they don't, Florentino Perez and Real Madrid are investing, and they are coming for them, if you want to say it like that. It's just Barça Femení, even with all their injuries, have still been on top quite a bit. So do you, the last question I'll ask you about this is that, do you like the idea of a Barcelona Real Madrid duopoly in the Spanish Femenino game? Is that good for the women's game or not? I don't, like, it's hard for me to tell.
It's a very good question. I mean, certainly Federation likes that there's going to be a lot of Real Madrid Barcelona games, even if in the Super Cup. But I struggle with it a little bit, because it almost feels like it's rewarding Real Madrid having not invested in a women's team for the last 20 years if they're the side that's kind of challenging Barcelona, whereas the likes of an Atleti, Real Sociedad, and even Athletic Club, these teams have invested and have kind of looked to promote the women's game a lot. So it feels a bit superficial if Real Madrid are kind of at the top of it. That said, if there's something that's going to drive interest, clicks, money, advertising towards the women's game, it's going to be Real Madrid and Barcelona. And if even just having that kind of name on it, even if it's not the Clásico in the women's game, as it were, it is still going to drive more towards it. So there's swings and roundabouts, there's positives and there's downsides.
Okay, final question. I promise. We talked about Negreta before. We're not going to talk about it again. But my question for you is just to peel off the hood a little bit. Do you feel like when Football España or anything you've been affiliated to, when you cover Negreta, are those links and are those views up? Like, does that get clicks? Because I'm always so confused because you see like the Spanish outlets covering it with the ferocity and aggressiveness they do, and I'm always wondering like, is that actually helping the bottom line? Like, does that stuff get more clicks than something about training or some transfer rumor that might be unsubstantiated? Like, do you see a little up? Like, do people really actually care, or at least an English speaking audience, do they care about the Negrera stuff? Like,
Not as much, I don't think. I mean, we're kind of duty bound to cover it to a certain extent. There's also the fact that nothing has really actually happened in the last kind of year or so. I mean, even if you look at kind of the testimonies of kind of Laporta, Luis Enrique, and Ernesto Valverde were released in the last couple of months, and they weren't entertaining. They didn't say anything of interest. Anything that you wouldn't have expected them to say wasn't in there. So yeah, I mean, I don't really see it kind of as in terms of kind of numbers much on Football España, but I also think that the type of Real Madrid fans that are interested in this will be following pages that are likely to be much more aggressive in their kind of treatment of the Negrera case than us. I mean, we're going to report it and we're going to kind of say what's happening, but we're not going to kind of go on and call Barcelona kind of a disgrace every kind of article or whatever. So yeah, I think the Real Madrid fans that are interested in that are going to different places for it. It's interesting. I was on a Real Madrid podcast recently, and we were kind of talking about Negrera, and it's funny the kind of echo chamber that kind of Real Madrid and Barcelona are in on this, and I kind of try and step out of it, and I kind of, as I said, I'm very much like you. I'm kind of leaving it until we get some sort of actual conclusive evidence or a conclusive court ruling, at least. I still think Barcelona should be punished in some way, shape, or form. I don't know quite how or who, but yeah, I think the Real Madrid the narrative is so vastly different that it almost exists in a completely different space to how Barcelona fans or how neutrals kind of interpret it. I think, to be honest, I think most kind of neutrals or more neutral people or people kind of covering the game professionally that aren't like kind of very closely tied to Barcelona and Real Madrid are just kind of like, right, okay, I'll deal with this when something important happens.
Yeah, I mean, my punishment would be, again, I say this from like a person who obviously doesn't want the club to be hurt too much, but I would say that they should have to, again, just basically pay their fine is equal to their whatever the payments prove to be. So if it's 8.5 mil, then they're fined 8.5 mil or something like that, right? Or double it. So they're fined 16 million or something. I think a financial fine would be fair to it. But Rory, it's unfortunate because your choice to be credible and unbiased. So instead of saying goodbye and letting you leave, I think I might have to just kick you off the show just to stir the pot a little bit. I mean, we have to be a little inflammatory here. So yeah, Ruri Barlow, as always, Football España. Yeah, you're unbiased, you're credible. Just disgusting behavior from you in the modern age of journalism. You're not even using AI slop at all. I asked Rory if he would just not even join the show and just be an AI version of himself, and he refused. He actually wanted to be here in person. So I don't know. Always credible, Rory. I appreciate your time.
You're too kind, Dan. It's always a pleasure to be on, and yeah, always a pleasure to discuss Barcelona in a kind of more maybe sophisticated is unfair to some other outlets, but certainly more relaxed and integral manner.
Oh no, we're taking it. I have been criticized many times over years for not boasting or tooting my own horn or publish or promoting my own stuff or whatever. But no, this show will likely get us over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. So we now have enough people who know that I'm enough of a blowhard that I have been credible enough to trick enough people into listening to me over close to a decade. So I appreciate you helping me get there. I appreciate everybody helping me get there. But it doesn't mean I'm stopping. Where the train continues on. So it's Real Oviedo on Sunday morning. I will see everybody on Big Up for the watch along for that, along with the prediction game. Remember, you can get these shows without the ads. Even better when we do long form stuff for Patreon, because there's more ads on the long form stuff on Patreon. So you get those without the ads on Patreon, and then there's the merch store as well, where I do plan on having a few more things. Actually, this just came in the mail this week. If you're watching on YouTube, I got I did get a new phone. My phone was like prehistoric for 5-6 years. So they did not make cases for that for a long time. But now I got this. I got a nice little Christmas present. But I got my phone case, the merch phone case in the mail. So yeah, that's on the merch store, and that helps me out as well. Again, follow Ruri over on Football España and all the great work that they do over there. And until next time, talk to you later. Sports Barça.